landscape design for arid landscape. And I will try to give definition of what is landscape, what it could be, sustainability, and I will focus on the role of gardens, which are here called productive gardens, and I will try to explain this during my presentation, into the sustainability of an earthy environment. So during this presentation, I will try to focus on urban landscape after the definition of landscape, and focusing on the relationship which is between gardens and urban fabric. So landscapes. Landscapes are some complex phenomena which are given by specific order made by human action into different regions. So different landscapes result from different human action in different regions, but different landscapes will also result from different human action in regions which have similar characteristics. And this depends on the specific cultural approach of man, people who design landscape, who transform the natural environment into a human environment, what we call the anthropic landscape, which is not something natural, which is not given by something which is not under control, but which is transformed by the people, by humans, by different civilizations. In this picture, there are some landscapes, some pictures of terraces, terraced landscape, in regions which have similar environmental characteristics. But as you can see, they have different goals. Because people from different culture, from different local attitude, transform with their own mind, with their own idea of human action into on natural environment, the environment itself. So landscape, combining both physical features and cultural overlay of human presence, often created over millennia, reflect the living synthesis of people and places, which are crucial to local and regional identity. In this sense, we can assume that an anthropic landscape, like all anthropic landscape, may be also defined as a cultural landscape. So as man, we have different cultures, and when we design, we interpret the environment with our culture. So we can transform it in different ways. So these are terraces, which are made by stone walls, other cultural landscape, but they have different forms, because in different regions, people, during the centuries, during the time, with different influences, cultural and social, and all kinds of influences, transform into their environment and their landscape. These are some other examples of different cultural landscapes. These are some pictures of courtyard houses in two Syrian cities, Aleppo, one left, and Hama on the right. Both cities have urban fabric which are given by systems of courtyard houses. All these houses have different similar topologies similar topologies, similar elements like one, which is over here. They have courtyards with a garden inside, similar features, which are different by the way, because of the presence in Hama of the Oronte river. The presence of this river So we can talk about different cultural aspects about this city, because the houses in Aleppo are completely introverted, while the houses in Hama, they tend to look towards the river. So the presence of the river strongly influences the structure of the houses. And these are other cultural landscape in the same region. This time we are in Iran. And as we can see, we are in Kashmir and Yazd. As you can see, we face again courtyard houses, urban landscape given by courtyard houses, with similar system to catch the winds, fresh winds. But in different cities, we have different languages and we have different uses of the materials. So even if we are in the same region, we are facing different cultural landscapes. And this is true also for this region. Recently we were in the other side of Algeria, in Naza and Italy. And where in the houses and buildings we have similar construction techniques, which are given by the presence of palm trees, basically, but in different settlements, we have different use of these materials and these settlements, which are related, strongly related to this specific urban culture. But landscapes are not something old. Landscape is not something which was formed during the time which is frozen somehow in a specific form. Especially when we are talking about cultural landscape, we don't have to think to something which is related to the past and which now needs to be frozen into specific forms. Because landscapes are living, territorial, urban, architectural organisms, and I will try to define what I do mean with this. And they need to change together with the changing in society. These are two examples coming from Italy. The first one on the left is Modélisation, which is a World Heritage Site. And the other one is Avril, it's another World Heritage Site in my region, which were urban landscapes, urban centers, Matera in particular, which were abandoned at certain point. Because the city developed as a troglodyte settlement, people used to live into some caves, which were into time story houses. And during the 50s, the city was abandoned, and people resettled in another neighborhood outside of the city. And during the last centuries, the old city center was restored, and people were encouraged to come back to their houses. But the urban landscape had to be modified somehow to be adapted to the new urban needs. And the other one is Avril, which is another small settlement in my region, in the Avril, which is a region in the south of Italy, which is built by groups of these houses called trulli, stone houses, which were restored and transformed into kind of open-air museum. So these are two very different approaches to the urban transformation of an urban landscape. We need to face the innovation, of course, because otherwise this urban landscape won't be living organism anymore. But we have to be very careful with the transformation that we want to apply to this. So, talking about cultural heritage, talking about cultural identities of landscape, we are facing these two sides of the medal. From the other side, there is the need of innovation. From the other side, there is the need to protect the feature that made this element, these cities, these territories, this landscape sustainable, and agricultural landscape. Today, while till now I showed you some examples of what I call sustainable landscapes, today, especially in the arid regions, what was at the basis of this urban sustainability, the urban landscape sustainability of cities and territories is changing. And this traditional balance between natural landscape and human action is shifting towards an careful use of technology, which is bringing new forms of sustainability, which needs a lot of energy, a lot of work to be maintained. These are some, it is a picture and some drawings of Doha in another arid region on the other side of the and which is an example of an urban sustainability who is given by a huge amount of energy, a huge human approach to be maintained. The city, as you can see from this picture, is made by buildings which are sustainable in their inside, which work very well from a point of view of the energetic point of view, but which doesn't form a real city, a real urbanism. So our elements are connected and somehow connected to some huge infrastructure, which doesn't define a real urban organism. Looking at the open spaces of the city, which are redrawn into these maps, they follow some languages, some space, some forms and so on, which are not related to the region, but which are related to some models which come from the outside, which come from Europe, from the English garden, for instance, which are very far from the local identity of the region, which was a region which was settled by oasis system of towns, small towns, and sustainable and relationship between different people. This is another example of an unsustainable landscape in the same region. This is the Dubai Miracle Garden in Dubai, which is a huge garden where there are, how many thousands of different flowers and trees and especially flower gardens. But as you can see, outside this garden there is a desert. So this is a garden which needs to be maintained of a huge amount of water, of energy to produce this water. In the Gulf region, for instance, they are using this, they are taking away the salt from the water, the water from these gardens. But they don't know what to do with this salt anymore. So this is the problem. This garden could be sustainable if you think that they use the salty water without the salt. But if you see in the complex how it works, it's unsustainable from a general point of view related to the environment and to the general And this is another example of a project of a new bridge, the bridge they are going to build in London. Since a few years they are cultivating the trees that will be used on this bridge in Scotland, because they want to make these trees and plants strong enough to resist on the strong wind that will be on this bridge. So yes, it's nice as a project, but it's something that is not related to the local environment and the local way to use things. So, starting from this example, which are examples of what I define sustainable and unsustainable landscape or cultural landscape. What I'm going to do is to pose some questions, and this is what I would like to discuss at the end of this presentation. So the questions are, what really does sustainability mean? Is sustainability something which is given from the outside, so we work a lot, we use energy, we try to recreate an environment to make it sustainable, like the example of the skyscrapers in Goa, or sustainability is something which is more related to the local culture, not to the relationship with parts of the landscape, of city, of architecture around us, which we have to understand and to follow to recreate this sustainability. If we are following the first way, we are talking about a global sustainability. So something which is not related to a specific place, something which is can be applied wherever in the world. If you are following the second way, we are talking about local sustainability, which is something very fragile, but which derives from specific place. So it derives from the specific culture of the place. So it's related to the local identity. So to me, this is the second path, the second route is the one I would like to try to follow into this presentation. So if this is true, I'm asking you again, can we say that sustainability can be interpreted as a cultural data? So something which is related to a culture, so different cultures can have different kind of sustainability. And the third question is the one I already exposed it, which is in order to create a truly territorial or urban or landscape sustainability, shall we rely on technological development, or shall we design landscape structures which are related to local culture? So what we want to achieve. That's why I'm talking about arid landscapes, because in the arid landscapes, which are landscapes in which we have very few resources, we have very few resources and elements that we can use for to give sustainability. This relationship in the past, but I hope that in the future is now considered, between human action and local cultural identity, has always been grounded on a painstaking remodeling of the environment to make it livable and to turn it into a rich historic cultural landscape. These are some pictures from Iran. I will show you a lot of pictures from Iran, from the Middle East, which are very similar to what you have somewhere here in Nigeria as well. On the left, there is a canal system, which is a Fogata, same system. Then here, there are some channels into the in the street, into the urban fabric, with water coming from the canal. This is a park, this is a big garden in Shiraz, Iran. This is an house in Kashan, which is another city in Shiraz. This is a system of to capture the wind and wind power, and this is a covered bazaar. So all these are systems of which were used to build this landscape, and their connection, their use, was at the basis of the sustainability of these places. So to remain alive. And here again we are in Iran. This is Kashan. This is the canal system. The water system comes from the mountains, and the canal system here on the ground. This is the settlement. The settlement was not isolated from the environment, but was related to system of gardens and garden avenues, which transform all the area into a real oasis. And this is the map of Faculté, which is one of the most important gardens in Kashan. And this was the place where the canal mouth used to civilize, and the origin somehow of the geometry of the garden itself. So everything, this is the main, this is the axis, the water axis, this water axis as well. So at different scales we can read this connection between landscape, territory, and architecture. Today, as I already mentioned, about the law or the guide, this relationship between cultural landscape, heritage, urban transformation is changing. It's changing, of course, because of different reasons related to maintenance, related to cultural changing, related to a number of reasons. But we have to ask to ourselves what we want to do as architects, as future architects and design, what we want to, where we want to go in our landscape design, urban landscape design, architectural design. This is a picture which I took recently in Beirut, which to me is very impressive, because in Beirut the building typology was given by these villas, these Ottoman villas in this area, which had gardens and all of them with all these windows used to look toward the landscape. And okay, Beirut was changed many times, not just because of the war, but before the war, from French was transformed, urban fabric and so on. But this is what we see now, no? What we want to have, what kind of urban transformation, landscape transformation we want to give to our city? Something which recalls us our identity, or something which use our identity as an element which remains there as kind of memory of the past, it doesn't exist anymore. What I want to say, this villa doesn't have this garden anymore, so the technology is changing. So if I take off the garden, I don't have the technology of the house, because the house technology was given by the garden lot and the villa inside. And the views of this villa were blocked by other buildings. And the presence of these tall buildings with a completely different typology and structure with regard to this villa completely created this homogeneity and bad function of this villa, which was abandoned. No? So if we don't listen, if we don't try to understand the characteristics of our cultural landscapes and identity, we are really the risk to transform this, what remains of these landscapes, in something which is more similar to a museum, something which is something frozen into the past, which doesn't exist anymore, instead of being a living context. So what we can do? We can do a lot of things. All of us perhaps have different ideas on how to go on, how to design, how to transform in a sustainable way our city and so on. Today I want to focus on a specific relationship between the presence of gardens and the urban form. So I won't talk about landscapes in general. I won't talk about cultural landscapes in general. Just had the urban objects. We already had urban agriculture, which was not just agriculture, which was given by the presence of gardens, which were, yes, productive, but were a very formal structure, and which were strongly related to the urban farm, the structure of the urban farm. So if we look at some examples, what I'm going to show, of this relationship between gardens and cities and landscape, perhaps we can try to follow the street, which will bring us towards a new reinterpretation of cultural identities. So this was an example of a project in Casablanca, or the most famous example all over the world was when this happening in New York, in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and so on during the last decades. Everything was transformed into urban objects, roof, the open areas, public places, school areas, everything was community connected. But if you look at our history, we have already this structure. And this is what we are going to talk about. And to talk about this, I need to show you this scheme, which is not made by me. This is a redrawing of a scheme which was made by Saverio Educatori, which was during the 60s of last century in Italy. We can say the father of the typological and ontological Italian school of Italian studies. Redrawn by Attilio Petruccioli's book After Amnesia, and in which I tried to focus on the presence of garden and of sustainable relationship between gardens and urban farming. So this drawing, this scheme, is made by columns and rows. In the first column, which is this one, it shows the relationship between different parts to have an architectural built-in organism. In the second column, it shows the relationship between the house, different houses, and different parts which make the city to make public. In the third column and in the fourth column, it shows the relationship which are the basis of territorial landscape. But this relationship is scalar. On the first row, we have the material. Material can change in different regions. In some regions, we can use, in our city, we use stone. We have stone cities, for example, traditionally used, of course, in regional culture. And everything is made by stones, even the ceilings and which are vaulted. And because we had stone, we had arid landscapes, we had stones. So in very past they used to have wooden ceilings, but then everything was made by stone. You can have brick, you can have wood brick, you can have wood. This is the material. Then you have the structure. What is the structure? The structure is how materials are connected one with the other. The structure is a law. It's a law that I'm using for building something. For instance, this is a triglyptic stone structure or whatever kind of structure. I can have arches, I can have different kind of structure. System is the next step of this scale. Is the law which connects this structure. So I can have wall street system, ceiling system, and so on. And all together, they make the building, which is called here organism. And this is, in this scale, okay, the house is the fact. On the urban scale, we have material which is given by houses, which is given by what we call special buildings, which means public buildings or religious buildings. Special buildings are all buildings which doesn't have a residential function, which together buildings, I have the building tissue. The building tissue is the law which connects different buildings or buildings. And then I have groups of buildings forming neighborhoods, and then I have huge neighborhood which together forming the city, what we call the urban organism. We have the same at this scale, because if we start from these different groups of buildings and we connect it with open areas, green areas, water system, and so on, and then we connect all these systems, we have cities. But the city is not isolated. If the city wants to be sustainable, it cannot be isolated from the environment, but is related to a specific territory. And the territory is given by a specific civilization. So this is what I started as something with this assumption. So when we are talking at landscape, we cannot focus on single elements of this landscape, urban, territorial, or forestry. But we have to try to connect all the elements which form these landscapes. Otherwise, they won't be sustainable. So if we focus on the urban scale, so I'm not going to talk about architecture or territory or city in this complexity. If we go focus on the urban scale, we have houses or gardens, all houses with gardens. We have urban fabrics, which are given in the city in detail by the law which connects these elements. And we have systems, urban system, and then we have so the fourth scale from which we start, talking about this sustainable relationship between gardens and landscape, urban landscape, is the scale of the urban element. As I previously mentioned, urban elements can be building parcels or agricultural parcels, because they are very widespread in our cities. Recently, so 2 days ago, we were in Canazza, and I found out that there were not just the Sal and the Palmarè, I didn't know that, but there were gardens inside Sal, real gardens, not inside the house, but garden blocks. So we have to take into consideration of these differences between these. And yes, agricultural park, formal gardens, these are the elements of this urban landscape. And the element is the simplest component of the urban organism. It's like a stone or a brick or a house. So we have to find the right role to connect these elements with our urban landscape. And these are some examples of relationship between gardens and elements in the city. Here we are in Iran again. This is a house in the old city of Kashan. And inside the house there is a courtyard, which is a garden with flower beds and pools in the middle. So this is the system which was at the basis of the sustainability of this house into an arid landscape. Of course, this was not the only system. As you can see here, there is a wind tower. Here there is a kind of living room for in Kashan. The houses have 2 wings. One is the summer wings and the other is the winter wings. So the houses were oriented, but the orientation of the houses in Kashan derived from the sun, the lighting and the sun. But in Kashan, the orientation of the urban fabric derived all from the direction of the canal. There are some studies which show that the canalization are the wells of this canal, which used to give water to this pool, in the middle of the courtyard, and the water of this pool contributed to the sustainability of the houses. So the garden was really at the center of the housing sustainability of the houses. And if you look at the buildings in Kashan, this is not an house, this is a mosque, this is the Avril mosque, and which was built on 3 levels. This is the level of, this is the street level, and this is the level of the courtyard. Again, for climatic reason, in a region where courtyards are very wide, courtyards were excavated under the street level to have more comfort, climatic comfort. So were gardens excavated, protected, which were the basis of the housing sustainability. You cannot see it from here, but if you will have the chance to visit some houses in Kashan, you will enter on the street level and you will go down, because the courtyard is always on the lower level. So this system was at the center of the architectural sustainability of these houses. But this garden form, as you can see, everything in Iran, in Persia, is with an axis or with 2 axes. No? It's geometrically, the layout is very geometric and so on. But these were productive gardens. Fruit trees, vegetables in the different courtyards. So what it was formal, it was also useful for the life inside the house. So this is another point of this sustainability. And here we are in Spain. Here we are in Cordoba. This is the courtyard of the mosque in Cordoba that was built by the Umayyads when they moved to Spain, and then large and finally transformed into church. So this is the church, the medieval Gothic church, this one, inside the mosque. But what I want to focus on is the presence of this garden inside and the center of the sun of this mosque. So when the mosque was built at the end of this transformation, instead of leaving active, this sun was transformed into a garden, productive garden with orange trees, palm trees. So something which was created, of course, with the idea of paradise. And I mean, it's not just something not productive because it used to be used this way. By the way, the same kind of trees and the same elements that we used to find outside the city for cultivation were used also inside the city. This is one of the oldest examples in Europe of this kind of garden, which was really the very city core of Cordoba for many years. But we don't have in our arid landscape, traditional cultural arid landscape, gardens just at the center of the houses. We can have really building plots made by gardens. Here again we are in Iran, on the left we are in Shiraz, the Arab garden, and on the right we are in, this is Sheikh Sukun, which is another garden in Isfahan, along the garden axis. So we can have also building plots. And we can have in our cultural area, cities, we can have also agrarian plots inside or outside the city structure. Here again we are in Kenazza with some agricultural product into the Formes, or in Kashan near the this is the citadel, these are the walls around squares and so on, or streets. So the law that I give to where how I connect with the plot can determine the second scale of this urban system. And these again are some examples of different laws. Here again we are in here in Algeria, in Franza. Here again we are in Kashan. Looking from the above, from using satellite view, Kashan is given by the aggregation of courtyards. We have in Saar, we have the aggregation of cordial buildings and some agrarian plots inside the If you look outside Saar, and if you look at the city which is there outside the settlement, we found different laws because we use different types. Building typologies. And we connect these building typologies in different ways, so we have different structures, basically. If we go to look at details in Kashan, we can, yes, you can see the presence of courtyard buildings aligned along streets, so this is structure, but this is another structure which is given by agricultural plots altogether, forming the area around the city. So in city we can have different kind of structure, depends on the elements that we use and the way how we connect. If we move to Syria, again, here we are again in Aleppo. This is a map of an area of the ancient city of Aleppo near Bab Nasrin, which was the gate to Roman countries, the medieval settlement of Nasrin. And here we can read different laws. For instance, if you look at souk, we have one structure because the souk is made by the aggregation of commercial cells along the street. But if you look here, we have different structure, which is given by groups, or what I call Avrilis, which means groups of buildings which are related, are connected by specific law, which is structure, given by houses with garden, so courtyard houses with garden in the middle, which gives the other structure. So the urban fabric, which is what we are going to talk about as third stage, is given by the relationship of these different urban structures. So this different urban structure form an urban system which is a neighborhood. And groups of neighbors gives us the city in its group. But what I want to say is that also in this case, the garden, the productive garden, was at the center of the house organization. Indeed, in Aleppo, only one, which are these loggia oriented toward fresh winds, all looking in red. You can see the one here in red. Only one look towards the north, because from the north are coming the fresh winds. And all the gardens are aligned along this axis of the one, which is this green line. So there is a very strong relationship between garden structure and house structure, even if we can think of garden as something unconnected from the architecture. But it's really. The other scale is given by the urban system. So we talk about aggregate and the existing structure. If we we connect different structures, we have different systems. And these are some examples of urban systems based on the presence of gardens and productive gardens. Here again we are in Isfahan, in Iran. Maybe most of you will know the urban history of Isfahan when it was founded by Shah Abbas as a garden city. With this palace here and the Maidan at the end of the old bazaar. Here, this was the palace, and this was the Charbagh. The Charbagh is this linear garden made by I don't know how many different gardens, which had changed tune at the beginning, and at the end, the river. So Shahbaz redesigned the city as a garden city, using the system of the Charbagh. Charbagh perhaps is the most evident and strong form of garden coming from Persian. And these are some rear view of this Charbagh. This is the Charbagh today. Unfortunately, of this Charbagh, very few remains today. We have just the street and a couple of palaces, Chesutun and Ashbesh, and the palace near the Maidan. The other gardens disappear because the garden perhaps is the most fragile cultural form of our cities. Because there are in city economic interests, and the one to build buildings where there is a garden or a garden. By the way, in Isfahan we still have street and some. This is Ashbesh, and Chesutun was the one that I showed you. But in our arid landscapes, we can have also different systems of gardens which are really related to the urban structure. Here we are in Marrakesh, in Morocco. The city again was replanned as a garden. This was a productive garden which was used by the prince of Marrakesh, because these are two of the main water tanks, which were places where people used to go and swim. So were used not just to give water to the agrarian parcels, which are here, which were, as you can see, square octagonal, very regular, with olive trees, boulevard, and other trees in the middle. So this geometry was not related just to the irrigation needs, was just a formal geometry. So the two of these elements were related, one with each other. And the pools, the water tanks, at the middle of these gardens, productive gardens, which were places of leisure, which were not just productive, were used, yes, of course, for the reservoir for the irrigation, but were used also as a place where to go and fish, swim, and so on. So in our culture, because when I'm talking about arid landscapes, I'm talking about the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern culture, which is somehow a very unique culture and related culture. These two ideas of production and leisure were never unconnected. Were always connected. And the foundation of this garden was at the basis of the city development in later phases. So also in this case, there is a strong connection between gardens, productive gardens in this case, and urban structure, so general urban system. And the last scale we are going to analyze and going to finish this presentation is given by the urban scale. The urban organism is a structure or system. So connection between the park and the city, which has an autonomous feature, which works autonomously somehow. So here we are again in Iran. We are in Shiraz. This is a wadi. This is a lake where the wadi water goes. So sometimes look here this picture, you can have this level of water, this level of water according to the quantity of water which goes into. And these are agricultural areas near the water reservoir, let's say. But here we have, on the other side of the city, a really garden city with urban fabric made by gardens with houses inside. And in the old city, we have courtyard houses, courtyard buildings, of course, so all the caravanserai, mosques, and houses and so on, they have all of them their courtyard inside. But we have also huge gardens on this side of the river, along this axis, which was planned by the dynasty who ruled Shiraz and made one of the capital of Iran. And here in green, you can see this presence of this very huge garden. So if we look at the city of the urban organism in its complexity, you can see the presence of these different forms of cohesion between urban fabric intelligence building and urban or agricultural fabric intelligence building. Here again, I'm coming in Algeria. This is again another example of urban organism. Again, we are in Penalsa, so it's a very complex system with the wadi system, the Xara, the Palmaret, and the new city. And you can say, okay, this is our identity, this is Algerian cultural identity. But if we move to, for instance, to Tinimun, but perhaps there are different other places with different features. Yes, we found the same elements. We found the settlement, traditional. We found the new settlement, French, colonial, whatever, contemporary. We found the productive gardens, which are the oases. As we think in Europe, no? For us in Europe, the oasis is a palm tree, a group of palm tree. That's not the oasis. The oasis is the relationship between all these things. But what I want to say is that in Tinimun, the structure is different from Penalsa, because while in Penalsa you have houses and some agricultural plots. In Tinimun you have gardens, agricultural plots with houses inside. So also if you have the same elements, the logic in which these elements are connected changes for us. So we have different structure, and so we have different urban organisms. And this is the last example. Yes, this is the last. I'm going back to Kashan, I'm going back to Iran. Apparently different region, completely different, but mostly same arid context. If you see in detail, similar structures, because here we have the canal system, the water system, but we have different technologies, so different landscapes, but similar logic of gardens inside of houses. And the territorial organism which is given by this relationship between city, agrarian fabric, huge gardens outside the city along this axis. This is the Babikin and Anshin, and the territorial system which is given by this canals and water system. Without water, the city cannot exist. In starts from this interpretation. If we don't understand how city, how a group of buildings, how territorial organisms work, we cannot design in a sustainable way. We need to interpret the characteristic of a place without focusing on a specific scale, but taking into account all different scales that form territorial organisms, and this is the landscape. And then we can decide, because we are individuals, we are designer, there is not just one way to do it. But if we don't interpret, if we don't understand, we will never